Hello everyone, welcome to Yarmouth Frame and Gallery. We are here at the gallery today for a conversation with Michael Vermette and his current exhibit and his featured 2020 Wilderness Waterways Visiting Artist in Residency. Welcome.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This was quite an adventure in the Allagash.
I can imagine. We love the Allagash, as you know, and it was you produce so much work. It is really amazing, and especially this piece in particular. But before we dive into all about this, let's first get a couple of questions in about you as an artist and your adventure and your journey.
Absolutely.
How and when did you decide that you wanted to be an artist?
You know, I always knew that because ever since I was young, I drew. And in fact, I drew so many drawings, and they had to be so perfect when I was young that I would erase holes into my paper until it was just right. And then I got some great art instructors growing up who told me that art didn't have to be perfect. And one of my favorite artists was James Fitzgerald, who said that art wasn't perfect, furniture was. So I love that quote, and I remembered that and passed it on to my students as well.
Yeah, that really does make a difference, doesn't it?
It does.
Just releases all of that tension around having to get something perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And especially with this project, you have to move on from each piece.
Right, you've got a limited set of time, you got to get what you get and move on.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a terrific rhythm with that. We'll talk about that later.
Okay. So what's it like for you when inspiration strikes? You know, that light bulb that goes off.
Inspiration comes, I think, when you're, sometimes when you have a downtime. And you're just kind of focusing on what it is that you're going to be doing next. It almost doesn't come from you. It comes from some other place.
I totally agree with
that.
And
for me, it's a spiritual thing. Very much. Art is almost like a worship or a meditation. And so when I get inspiration for a project like this one, this was I actually wrote the grant for this, or not the grant, but the application for it.
Oh wow!
In one day.
Wow!
And it just poured out of me. And I know that there was, a lot of inspiration, that came from that, and from outside, outside kind of me.
Well, your spirit guides and all of that just kind of come in, and you see your path clearly. When
For me, it's the spirit. It is the spirit, and it's a clear voice that I have a relationship with, and so it's amazing. It
Wonderful.
Is. And to be led by the Spirit on location in plein air painting, I think is really important.
Right there with nature. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is your process like after you've been inspired? You're in the gallery, I'm not in the gallery, but in your studio space, and it's time to put the pen to paper.
So you're trying to collect, I think when you're on location, you're collecting a lot of information, which means you have to be totally open and present. So, meaning my process is that you're not looking at the past of what you've just done, and you're not looking into the future, what you're about to do, but you're totally present in the moment. And so, I don't know if that's very existential or whatever that's called, but what that means is whatever's happening at the moment in the landscape, you can capture that within a 2-hour block. So my painting process came from this whole idea of the race on Monhegan Island by Robert Henry, who invited his students over, I think in 1905 or 1906, and it was Randall Davy and George Bellows, which were really top students of his, and Randall Davy was the youngest, and they all decided that with this gentleman's bet that they would go out and paint as many paintings as they could on the day.
Oh, and you called that the race?
The race. And so it was really more of a marathon of paintings that they did. And they did, I think that year, that out of that came over 100 paintings.
Oh my goodness.
For all of them.
Wow.
So, the exact amount is noted and all of that, and everyone can correct me on that. But I think what the focus is they must have done at least 4 to 5 paintings a day.
Wow.
And that was what I was interested in. What is the rhythm that occurs when you paint that many paintings a
And
day.
you've got these professionals that are just so, I mean, it's their life.
Right.
And they're doing it.
And so you get a chance in the wilderness like this, in the Allagash wilderness waterway, to actually live that life.
Right.
And so what would you do? So what I decided to do is go to different places, at least 3 to 4 different places a day, and try to do a painting at, each within a 2-hour block of time during the day.
Wow, that is really an adventure. I mean, there's no other word for it, because you're packing all of your gear, you're doing everything, you're sleeping out there.
And you're cooking, and you're doing all the regular things you would normally do to survive.
So immersed.
But there's an incredible amount of planning as well that goes into this.
Right,
so
it's not all play. You got to wear all these hats to really get it done.
Right, and this was during COVID.
Oh, wow.
So when COVID broke out, a lot of stores were closed. It was very hard.
Right.
Like, for example, I realized that there was 91 or 92 miles of waterway. After I got the residency, so I realized there's gonna be a lot of
oops.
there's gonna be a lot of planning, and if you're going to do it like the Native Americans have, then you're going to treat it as a waterway. So you need a watercraft. So then you look up all the requirements of what the watercraft has to pass in terms of what the boat motor and all of that. So I would go to places like Old Town Canoe, where I'm from in Old Town, and it was very, very difficult getting to see any of the directors because of everything being shut down.
Right.
And so you only had a few months to get prepared. So it was amazing. I would go over to Old Town Canoe every day until I finally just kind of walked in, and at the same time, walked in the director or the actual one of the head CEOs.
Wow.
Who said, write me a letter and then I'll give you a professional rate for a canoe.
Oh,
so
wow.
I got, I was able to get sponsored by them and other wonderful.
That's another hat that you have to wear, because you have to have the wherewithal to be able to go out there and sell yourself.
Right.
Be that gentleman and
and let them know what you're doing in terms of a plan, and that you have a plan. I would go to different sporting places and pick up equipment sometimes that they would give me, and it was quite a rush.
Yeah,
because you only have a few months to get ready.
And when you're into it like you were, where you're just overtaken with doing this thing, and you're so invested in it and you believe in it so much, that energy is just so easy in a way to have other people just want to join in and help you with that.
Right, and you do feel like you're well supported.
Yes.
But it's, you have, like I said, a very short time to get to that place where you have to get everything in line, and then suddenly you're going.
Exactly.
And then you're going to a place like me. I've never been to the Allagash before this. I've always wanted to do that. I've always wanted to go to the Allagash and teach a workshop there or do some painting there. And when this came out, I don't know if you want to talk about how this came about.
I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
So how this came about is two of my, because you think about the spirit involved in things, but one of my fellow teachers of the school, of the Indian Island School that I taught at, Sue Eaton, she actually wrote a letter to me, emailed me a letter, and said, you ought to do this. And it was right during COVID, and we both laughed at it because they're wanting us to socially distance and
what better place
be
to
isolated.
Do that?
And we thought, here's a place where you could be totally isolated from everybody. And so I thought, oh, that would be okay. I could do that, and but then I didn't think much of it, put it out of my mind. And then one of my students, who's actually another one, who is a monitor in my workshops often. She's going to be teaching her own workshops pretty soon, and that is Nora West. She said, you should do this. So whenever two people come and tell you should do something, that's
Comes
a
in
confirmation.
threes. Exactly.
And you're confirmed to do something. So I thought, wow, I really should do this. And there was only like 2 days before the application deadline.
Of course.
So I sat down on a Saturday and just wrote, and it poured out of me all of the ideas that I had. And so how I approached this, you asked me about how I did this. There's 4 steps I think they must have done on this race.
Okay.
So one is that you have to see the end in sight.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to help your viewers, which means
back to the Monhegan race.
Right,
yes.
the Monhegan race. So you have to see the end in sight. You have to imagine how many paintings you're going to be able to do in a short period of time.
Okay.
So there is the 50th anniversary that was occurring at the very same time in 2020.
Okay. Yeah.
So I decided I would do a painting per day. Not a painting per day,
Okay.
per year, I guess, of the 50th anniversary within the 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So I would try to do 50 paintings in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And so that's an average of about 3 to 4 paintings and sometimes 5 paintings.
So size, medium?
In the smaller size, it was going to be what was pretty much what they did. They would do something like 11 by 14, 8 by 10s. I know Edward Hopper and a lot of artists that followed, they also did similar sizes, like 9.5 by 13.
Okay.
And they were the most charming paintings I'd ever seen on Monhegan because they had a kind of rhythm to them.
Okay.
And they were beautifully composed. So there's no time to think of when you're painting on location like that.
Yeah,
when you're doing that.
it's quick.
And so what you're doing is I prepared over 25 substrates of oil, and I prepared watercolor paper that was Wattman, high caliber, paper that you can't buy anymore.
Exactly.
And it's all handmade, and they were about I think they're about 8 by 10, and a little larger than that actually for the watercolors, and the oils were 8 by 10s.
Okay.
And so then I ended up doing about 51 paintings in the end.
Wow.
So you have to have that vision ahead of time.
To keep up with the 4 or 5 a day, or
Yes.
did you end up sketching some and going back later, or?
So I never went back. In fact, I pretty much completed everything on
Okay.
site.
So you just got to be happy with it,
You
and
just-
and again,
yeah,
that
you have to move on.
imperfection
You have to
is
move on.
fine.
So the second thing is you have to maintain your joy through this whole thing.
Definitely.
So the joy of painting is the actual act of painting, which is, you're putting aside maybe the painting you just did, and then you're getting back into the act and the love and the joy of painting, which is, you have to focus on that because there's so much setup involved, there's so much pre-planning involved, and when you finally get there, you have to forget all of that, put it out of your mind, and just get into the sheer joy while you're there. And so that they talk about the joy of painting, they talk about the excitement of painting. And a lot of your painters that are plein air will focus on this, and that will allow nature to come in and do some wonderful things. But once your joy is gone, you're done.
Yeah.
So you could have a bad experience with animals, with nature, with all kinds of things that could discourage you to the point where once that's gone, your joy, your focus of why you're there in the first place, then you're done.
It's done.
And then the third thing is literally, and this is really, really important, because I started to look and study at what they must have done. So you're doing that many paintings, you can't have them around in your studio or your cabin, as it were, here at Loch Dam, looking at you.
Oh, sure.
So you're collecting all this stuff, and the more you do, right around 10 or 12, the more you realize, I can relax now, and I don't have to do.
That's a good point.
So what I did, and this is incredible, I would put away my artwork. So basically, you put it out of sight.
Okay.
And you pack it away so you don't see it anymore. And then it isn't until after the residency that you unpack these, and it becomes like Christmas.
Oh.
Because you see it like each one as a gift, free from all the struggle. And James Fitzgerald did this as well. Sometimes he would pack away his paintings for 2 years.
Wow.
And then come back and look at his artwork with fresh eyes, and he would call that free of the battle.
Oh, well, it's when you're in the throes of it.
Right.
You're out there and you're just doing it. And I think, in my experience is once you've done that and you put it away, you kind of forget about it.
Right.
And then when you bring it back out, you feel the whole nother wave of inspiration and, I don't know, just this love of the whole experience.
So
the
this one had a
experience as
study
whole.
too that was done very quickly, and you use the study. I used a lot of photography. I brought a photographer over, and he and I took a lot of still shots and also video.
Very nice.
Just to get, because my whole thing is to create a lot of sense of movement and life in the painting.
Certainly have done that here. Tell us a little bit about this now.
So this painting is Matt LaRoche in the back, who just retired this last year as the superintendent of the Allagash Wilderness Waterway. And so he was the one that was actually reviewing my application. They had a board.
Okay.
And so he kind of had a vested interest in this, and he's been trying to get artists out for years, and he finally got this thing off the ground. This person is Ranger Bruce.
Ranger.
And he's one of the rangers that works under Matt, and he's also a conservationist. So I think he in the park in Baxter Park as well. He works in Baxter Park and Allagash, like a lot of these rangers do. And so I asked Matt if he would choose a ranger, and he chose the perfect ranger for the bow. And they came down a couple of times. We actually had them come twice. And this is Chase Rapids. So these are created when they open up the floodgates of the dam.
Okay.
The Churchill Dam.
All right.
And so Chase Rapids are created because the water rises probably 3 or 4 feet over the rocks. And once they close the dam, these rocks are exposed again.
Oh.
And so these two guys normally would carry your equipment down by truck.
Sure.
So that you wouldn't dump and spill all your equipment, you know, if you're traveling down through the Allagash. And I asked them to do it, and I was so honored that they would do that for me.
That's awesome.
So we captured that thing that happens every year, you know, several times a day, you know, usually around noontime. And they were able to you know, kind of model for me for that. And it was an action shot. So we use photographs, I use them, but I don't copy them.
Sure.
I use them, and
gotta have some artistic
it's
license.
also really good to have a study. I didn't put them in the study because I wanted to get these rocks exposed.
Right.
So, like Eric Hudson, he's another great painter of Monhegan Island. He said, paint what's underneath the water.
Of course.
Paint the bottom of. He would have James Fitzgerald paint people rowing in the sand on the beach, and then after include your water,
right?
So that the boat feels like it's right in the water.
Exactly.
So that I wanted to do to study, you know, the lower levels of the water as well as the higher level. And so and this is an important, where a lot of guides or woodsmen actually, this was a bunkhouse many years ago, so I wanted to include that. And in a lot of the photographs, it was obscured. So, you know, trying to create a sense of place as well as the movement and the water and the absolute calm on their faces as they're going through this, you know, kind of torrent of water.
Exactly. Well, I have one more question for you before we move on to look at some watercolors. But when did you come into your style? The thick paint. I know you have 2 different bodies of work, maybe more with the watercolors and the oils, but how long did it take you to develop this?
I think style is within you. You can't run from your style. You recognize it, it happens. And it usually happens before you're aware of it. People say, oh, I can recognize your paintings anywhere. And it's interesting because in high school, I didn't like thick paint at all. I just was a watercolor artist and was looking to be more like Andrew Wyeth and very realistic. But I developed a feel for that by the time I graduated from Maine College of Art. Because I think the thing about thick paint is that it's sculptural in a sense, and it does kind of move the figurative out more. And I love that whole quality of it. It also creates a sense of, with the black oil medium that I used, James Fitzgerald put me on to that.
Very nice.
So in my whole sense of painting, I'm trying to make color brighter.
Okay.
So by doing wetting the back of the watercolor paper, it creates a glow of the you know, and probably up to 20 or 30%, you know, more color that I can get out of that, which Jim would talk about, and Ann Hubert, who I would meet with, would say, try that, Mike Vermette, try that. And I would say, oh, I'll try it, and I never did, and it wasn't until I actually tried it that I was amazed at the grain, the texture, and the nuances of color that I could get, especially with the handmade Whatman paper, which is just amazing paper.
Yeah, you really do have to get in and play a lot with exploration and just being, out there.
Yeah, I love that. I love playing. It's like a controlled play.
Right, exactly. You're learning something from it.
And so the black oil wax medium does that too. It actually brightens the paint and it creates a viscosity that will actually hold the texture of the mark.
Okay, well, not everybody might understand what that medium is. What did you call it? A black oil?
It's black oil wax medium, and it's an old Venetian style of painting that the Italians really added wax to it.
Okay.
So black oil is made of litharge, and which is a rust of lead, and linseed oil. There's like 1/10 of that in the mixture, and 10 parts linseed oil.
Nice.
So that's a little on the dangerous side using any kind of lead. But it's not pure lead, because pure lead would actually be flammable if you tried to put that in any kind of oil. So it has to be rusted, and it has to have a very high kind of content to it of lead.
Okay.
So otherwise you get a lot, you know, when you make this yourself. So this has to be made yourself. You can't buy it in the market today. And there are a few people out there that make it, and I'm one of them. I make 3 different types: a winter, and a summer, and a spring.
Interesting, because of the wax.
Because of the wax. So the wax is the healthy thing that you put into it, and it suspends everything. So it literally comes off your hands and all that better, but I do wear gloves when I paint.
Yeah, does it make the paint like whipped butter, or?
Yes, it makes it very buttery, and the viscosity meaning that when you put a stroke down, it creates the edge of that stroke like peanut butter, and it literally stays, it doesn't relax.
Oh.
So, so what I love about that is that it captures the soul of the painter's mark. Right. And I love that.
Yeah.
You know, so every mark that I put down here wasn't altered in its drying process. And it does skin over because of the lead overnight. So, you know, I paint pretty much alla prima, which means pretty much for the moment, and then work my way down and around, and sometimes I'll paint over, but not a whole lot.
Wow. Well, thank you. We're going to take a little break, and we're going to go look at some watercolors. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Yeah, so before we get started talking about the watercolor collection, there was one other thing that Michael wanted to share with us about the Monhegan and the race and the 4 things that you needed. What was that 4th thing?
Well, the 4th thing, and it's important to know that this is my observation of what I think they must have went through, but the 4th thing is to push on. You're going to, like every race, and it's interesting that they call it a race.
Yeah.
There is a point where you're going to hit a wall. You're going to feel like you don't want to paint anymore. You're going to feel like, you know, you just don't have, you're running out of gas. You just don't have enough in you. And you have to find it within yourself to push on.
Right.
I think one of the things that's important to realize about that moment when you hit the wall, you're at your best. So every painting comes almost automatically, and
that's very
beautiful.
Interesting, because that's a fine line between knowing you've hit the wall and knowing whether or not you've lost the joy. Right? So there's that, you got to know that.
Right, and I think you're more running on instinct at that point, and I think nature takes over more, so that the spirit in the landscape or whatever. And so, and then you get back, I think once you start painting, then all of that comes. The joy comes, all of that, but you don't feel like it. You don't feel like getting up in the morning at 5 in the morning to see, you know, you don't feel like trudging up a mountain and you wonder if you're even going to make it up there, if you got bad knees or whatever it is, you know, it all comes against you, and it feels like a solid wall.
That is such good information, Michael, and thank you, because that just really, you're in the throes of it, You're
Right.
incredibly grateful for the opportunity,
Right,
but like you say, you hit a wall.
right,
And you get visited
right,
by, whatever that is. And you have to push through that in order to, once again, understand the commitment, the want, the
Right.
joy, and all of that to get out there and do it again. And I think once you do,
Yep.
with your cup of coffee in the morning or your tea or whatever, you just are like, okay, now I'm ready.
So there's nothing to do about feeling ready to do anything or
Ah.
feeling like you want to slide into the painting. It's basically pushing yourself.
Okay.
And so you are stretching and pushing yourself. And I think that's important, because
So it's
I think
a
that's
challenge.
and I think these residencies like the Monhegan residency, the residency that was designed in the Allagash, they don't really expect you to do anything in particular.
Oh.
But you're selected out of over 100 people that have applied. Of course you're going to do something.
Right.
And you want to make sure you put your best foot forward, as it were, and make the great paintings that you think you can do. And so with this idea that I said I was going to do it, that also pushes you along and makes you. And I think that's the thing that happened with the race. You don't race by yourself. You're racing with, and not necessarily competitively against each other, because they were all good friends. Robert Henry and George Bellows, that was like his protege student.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And they were challenging each other and saying, this is what I'm going to do, that's what I'm going to do. So Randall Davy had a very small compact, so he could get around the island real quick. And George Bellows had a wheelbarrow. So,
There's no
I think
right
it was,
or wrong way.
I think it was one of them that had a wheelbarrow. And he also had things hanging from him because he was very fit, like a baseball. He could have been a professional baseball player. And then Robert Henry probably had something similar. So they each had their own way of doing it, and they challenged each other. And I think that is important, and that does happen among painters. Plein air painters challenge each other.
Yeah.
With the Cape Ann. And also the Cape Elizabeth Land Trust, those particular plein air festivals, you have some of the best, in fact, the best, painters, pretty much that come and paint there, and they challenge each other.
Well, I don't think you can get that confidence any other way,
Right.
except to get out there and keep doing it.
Right. And even if you're not invited, you could still go out with them.
Exactly.
Because I last time I did the Cape Elizabeth Land Trust, there was a painter that was painting just below me, and I asked him if he was a part of it, and he said, that he wasn't a part of that, but he was out there painting with me.
There's just such a spirit of energy around an event like that to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would invite anyone who would want to come along, and paint, because I think there's a lot of energy there, a lot of positive, good. Vibes that you're going to get from other artists, and some great tips too.
And it's a fabulous location to paint.
Right.
So let's hear a little bit about the watercolors, and how many did you produce?
I did 26 watercolors.
Nice.
So 26 on the first week. My residency was divided up into 2 weeks. So the first week I did all watercolors, and then I would go back the second week and do all oils.
Okay.
But it wasn't 2 weeks in a row. I actually did a workshop in between the two.
Okay.
So it was a little crazy because I had promised before I knew about the residency that I could, be available in Rangeley to do a workshop. And I'm having another one this year.
Oh, great.
So I'm very excited. So because I did a Rangeley watercolor workshop, I wanted to do the watercolors first. And I also did the first watercolor workshop in the Allagash.
Oh, wow.
So that was another bucket list goal that I said I was going to do, that I actually was able to do through Matt LaRoche and the people of Nugent's camp.
Wow.
They actually were extremely generous, wonderful, clean camp, and one of the oldest camps on the Allagash on Chamberlain Lake.
Yeah.
So we did exactly those 4 steps that we talked about, and instead of just teaching, the new thing that artists are doing now is bringing them, the public, or anyone who wants to take it. It was free. It's absolutely free if you could just get yourself
That's
there.
amazing.
And well, they did. A lot of people came from the plein air group with the Maine plein air group.
Oh, okay.
And anyway, different people, even from the New England Watercolor Society out of state, some of them came. And what we taught about is this race. And so, and this whole process of how I was painting. So rather than just teach at them a style, what I taught is basically this is what the artist in resident is doing right now. And so therefore you can try that process as well.
That's awesome.
So that's the whole new thing that's happening, I think, out there in the world, is that they're bringing students and sometimes offering it for free if they're a resident artist for them to come along and learn the process that they're doing at that very
So
moment.
important. That
So I
really
never
is.
stopped. I actually did the 4 or 5, I think I did 5 paintings on that one-day workshop so that they could see, and then I could make up for any loss that I might have the following day. Because I think the first day of the workshop, the first day of the residency, actually, I only did 2 paintings. So I had to make up for it. And that's the other thing. You know, if you don't do 4 in one day, you're going to have to do 5 or 6 the next. And I could do it a lot quicker with watercolor because they're like watercolor sketches.
Do you have a favorite?
I don't, because I think, and I shouldn't say that because there are some that I really like that I want to go back in and maybe make larger paintings out of. So yeah, I do have some favorites. I think this one down here is particularly nice because of the experience I had. I literally got lost.
Oh, wow.
So the trail out to the little Allagash Falls was pretty clear in the early afternoon, but as I finished the painting and it got darker, I ended up going on a deer trail and getting totally lost.
Oh.
And so then I just, at that point, depended on a spiritual kind of, because I didn't have a compass or anything. So one of the things I heard is this story that if you get lost, go with what is familiar to you before you got lost. And I knew that the river was on the right and the brook, and I couldn't hear it anymore. So that's the scary part, and it was getting dark.
Yeah.
So I had to go through a real thicket, and I got scratched all up.
It's
But
big.
when I came out
Country up there.
right at the bank.
Oh, wow.
Right at the bank of the trail, where the trail was, and the sun was setting through the trees. And that's a painting I still want to do, and it was Allagash Falls, and I did 2 of them. Some of them have been sold, about 11 paintings or 12 have been sold in the collection. But if you can buy these, you're going to have an awesome part of that whole experience, because you know, all of them have different, like a sunset, and this was done really early in the morning, like 3 in the morning. That's when that one was painted.
Wow.
That was amazing because everyone was asleep in the camp. If you've ever had that where you're the only one out there, or at least you think you were, and I paint with a headlamp. So I'm up and down like this with my head sort of like signaling, and across, you know, without knowing it, and across the way of the lake, there was another camp, and somebody was signaling back.
doing the same thing.
Yes, so it's like you're not completely alone. So it's kind of nice, you know. But that was a very nice, you know. So all of these have different stories to them. The lock dam itself has been changed into a water spillway. But before it was a huge wooden lock system where they would transport logs into Chamberlain Lake.
Wow, okay.
So the whole riverway or waterway actually flows from the north to south.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't go from you know, to the north
Right.
like most of us think.
Right.
Is that right? Maybe if I have that right. I think I have. Yeah, I think it flows south to north.
Okay.
Instead of the other way around. It goes south to north, I'm sorry. And because of that, everyone you know, thinks it goes one way, but it doesn't. And so what they were trying to do is avoid all of these logs going to Canada. So they created lock dam and different systems to try to get it to come through to the Penobscot to
Bangor. It's their own version of down east.
Right. And I think a lot of historians could get that better than me. But you could see the evidence of the old logs, you know, and how they created some new stuff. And that lock dam itself, that cabin that becomes the resident cabin is amazingly spirited with, you know,
Gosh, I can't even imagine.
yeah, you're out in the wilderness,
Yeah.
you're out alone, and you're also in between Eagle Lake and you know, Chamberlain Lake, and there's this stream that goes in between the two. So that becomes a major thoroughfare for animals.
Of course.
So you see all kinds of deer, you see all kinds of you know, wildlife,
Yeah.
and even, you know, when you're getting up in the morning to use the outhouse, I heard a grunt of a bear.
Oh, wow.
Like a threatening thing. And I
Yeah.
hurried up and got into the cabin. And then I asked Matt LaRoche about that. He says, well, you're right in the middle of a thoroughfare
Right.
where animals go from one lake to the other.
You're gonna see them.
And there, you know, the first time I did paint on right on the Eagle Lake, you know, where the portage is, and it's Martin Cove, I think it's what it's called. And I think it's Martin Stream too. But anyway, I set up there and I was just about ready. I just was, it was like 5 in the morning and I couldn't get there quick enough because I didn't want to, you know, I wanted to capture this, which you don't have, but is a sunset. I mean, sunrise that was happening was the first painting I did. And I wanted to do it before I had to go teach at another camp, which is about 4 miles down. So I actually got there, and just about as I went down the bank, there was a moose.
Oh my God.
And a cow. They were
wow.
eating, and she was like having her breakfast fine and all calm, but he was looking right at me.
Oh.
So they have a full moose with a rack, you know, a bull moose.
I mean, you got to know that
it's pretty unnerving.
Huge. They're huge. They're like a truck.
Yeah.
They're like a big truck.
And would have no problem running me down if he wanted to.
No, at all.
So we both kind of just stood and looked at each other for a while, and we kind of waited each other out until I finally decided either I'm going to watch him, and I didn't have a camera, I didn't have any of that, didn't even have my cell phone, and I said, shoot, this is the only time, you know, I could have got them both, and then I just decided, well, I need to paint, that's what I'm here for, so I took one step forward, and he turned and bolted. He bolted. They weren't in a rut. He wasn't in a rut, so he had like velvety antlers. But I never seen an animal move so fast in my life. They were gone in seconds. And it was so funny because she brought her head up and like, what's the matter? Because he had excellent hearing, and he was focused right in on whatever I was going to do. And he took off. She was right behind him, and they were gone for the day. So, and I did see her later on in the residency the week after that second or third week, but I never saw him again. So it was, you know, you really got to be ready. You've got to have, you know, camera sometimes, because some of these things only happen within a split second, and then you capture them.
I've only got one more thing to ask you about, and that's your book. There's a book with this. And what was that like to produce? And
well, when I was there, here's the book right here. It's called 50+1, and it's basically based on the 50th anniversary of the Allagash Wilderness Waterway, and the one are the paintings that follow. So the paintings that were done in the studio are the one, you know, +1. And there's actually 4 or 5 paintings, maybe about 6 or 8 now that have followed. And there will be a second edition to this, but there's not many books left. So, and it's the Allagash Wilderness Waterway Inaugural Visiting Artist Residency of 2020. My patron, you know, Paul and Adrian Paiwanski have been my patrons for years, and Adrian was the one that actually edited the book. And she was fantastic to work with because she would ask me questions to clarify what I was trying to say. So in the book, what I had done every single day, I wrote a journal. So I realized, being the first artist in resident, that there will be other people that will follow. And there are people occasionally that will ask me and call me up and say, well, what did you do? What was it like? And all of that. And I thought, let's create a book so that they can see the inside of the cabin, see what they have for equipment and all the other stuff that you have to kind of find out on your own, so that this book becomes a resource in that way. Also, I wanted to put down those 4 steps and how the workshop was actually taught. So you have those lesson plans in the book.
Very good.
And then on top of that, you have my entry journal entries of each day. I could probably read one, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, let's do one.
Let's do. So yeah, this is really amazing. Like day 5, it is Thursday.
Let's see the picture first.
So we have these are the locomotives. So these are the 2 trains. It's the craziest thing. You go to the portage that connects. There's 2 portages. The one at Lock Dam. Oh yeah, there's that one too.
This one.
Yeah. And then there's another portage that goes from Chamberlain Lake. And it says, "It is Thursday and I've never been so undecided about where to paint. Last night I finished the watercolor of the rusted trains, and this morning in my cabin I started my second painting of the locomotives from photos of the trains at Eagle Lake Portage on my laptop." And the reason why is because it was raining. You still have to paint.
That's right.
And so I had to do it on the porch. These trains had such an unusual rust color to them that they just seemed to glow in the green wilderness. Yesterday I was told by Ranger J. Young that today I should just stay hunkered down at the cabin because it would be a washout and that it would rain heavily with high winds that could make it dangerous to be out on Chamberlain Lake. That's the other thing. These guides come out and check on you every day or every other day. They also leave you a walkie-talkie kind of like radio.
Yeah.
So in case you get into an emergency
it's
situation,
dangerous up
you can
there.
call them and they have this huge motor that they can get to you in minutes and get you to help. But you know, it's important also to realize when you're doing a residency on Monhegan or in a place like Allagash, you're out there in the wilderness, so it's going to be hours if you hurt yourself before you're going to be able to get to a hospital. So you have to be really careful about, your surroundings, be aware of your surroundings and all that. He had also pointed out that my DeLorean map, Atlas and Gazetteer, was printed in 1980s and was outdated, and some of today's roads were not even on the map. And he and Ranger Alyssa Lutz had given me a new version of the Gazetteer, and it had traced my route, they had traced my route to Little Allagash Falls on the map. Now this is before I got lost. And I'm on my way to Allagash Falls, Little Allagash, because Allagash Falls is over 100 miles from where I was.
Wow.
It's really quite, almost 92
vast.
miles on a tote road to get there,
Right?
just to paint that.
Big country.
So I had to pick and choose my places. Since then, it was hard to get that place out of my mind because I just wanted to paint the waterfalls. And the stream that connected Chamberlain Lake to Eagle Lake was too low to navigate by canoe. And now the wind was making it impossible to even cross the lake to get to the northwest side. But I just felt in my gut that the day would be better than the forecast that was predicted. And sure enough, that's the spirit thing. Sometimes you got to go with your gut feeling. As the morning progressed, I finished my second watercolor. The sun came out at about 11 a.m. and I realized I had enough time left in the day to get out and paint 2 plein air watercolors of Little Allagash Falls.
Nice.
So I'll just stop right there. So I thought I had plenty of time, but that doesn't mean you can't get lost.
Right.
And then I realized the other thing you have to be very aware of, and it talks about it in the book, is that you have to realize that gas out there is 4 times more expensive if you try to buy it in the Allagash.
Oh, of course.
So your only place to get it is Millinocket. So you have to travel an hour to get to Millinocket to gas up in order to go and travel on these tote roads.
Right.
So I had to bring a 5-gallon jug of gas or tank of gas with me so that I wouldn't run out.
Wow.
So there's a lot of planning, but absolutely awesome. And you do get the best advice from these rangers.
And you've got an instruction book right here.
Right, and it's kind of cool. And you've got maps, and you've got all the paintings that have wonderful color plates in them. Little kind of crow feathers, because my wife is Native American, and that's her Crow clan.
Yeah,
And
very
so I
sweet.
put that there too, and I had a hard time trying to find someone at the last minute that would be willing to go. So I did find Troy Sands, who was a professional photographer who did go out with me and came,
That
I
was
think, on a
so
weekend
valuable.
overnight and took pictures of me painting on location, and that was in Down East Magazine last year.
And a few in the book.
And quite a few in the book, just
Yeah.
about as many as I could get in there that actually went with the narrative. And there are different people, a lot of young people, a lot of older people, different ages. And I think the privilege is that you get to come upon these camps. There's like over 300 camps on the Allagash Wilderness Waterway.
Wow.
And the rangers check on each one of these camps and they maintain them. So it's a terrific amount of work.
Wow.
So when you get this residency, you're on your own. You can't employ a ranger to help you
No.
or even to be your guide.
Right.
So you have to pretty much be your own guide or bring a guide or something like that. And so that's what I would recommend is to try to, when you're writing a residency like this, try to imagine what it would be like to be out there and to do all of these things so that you can, have a lot of success.
Well, thank you so much, Michael,
You're
for
very
being
welcome.
here. This was really informative, enjoyable. I've had a great time. Hope you have. And I just want to say that if there's anything you think you've missed or you want to hear more, Michael has all of that on his website in the About section. And all of his paintings and a continued professional career here as an artist.
So we have about 25 of these left, not very many out of the 500 that we had when we first started. And so if you're interested, there is an application form on my website, which is michaelevermette.com.
I'll
And
put
if you
a
go to
link
that,
in the bottom here.
And you'll be able to go there and actually order the book and see what I'm doing. Please sign up for my website too. There's a newsletter there that I try to put out every month as well.
Well, and you'd be well smart to do that because as a teacher, and I mean, you're just a wealth of information.
Well, I'm retiring this year after 35 years of teaching,
Wow.
and I'm very excited to become a full-time painter. So
Nice.
I'll be doing this even more full-time, creating even more artwork, and I'm very
You can
excited
always
about
see
that.
it here at the Yarmouth Framing Gallery.
That's right.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much.